Yes, the whole world is talking about the spat in the Oval Office. Was it a setup? Was it not a setup? Who set up who? Was it Zelenskyy who set up the others? Was it Trump or Vance who set up Zelenskyy? Who knows? Rita and James, what did you make of it? What exciting television. Donald Trump was right about that, wasn't he?
Indeed.
Oh, it was exciting television, and I've been just as excited and appalled by some of the so-called analysis in the aftermath. Clear that most of those doing the analysing haven't even bothered to watch the full 53-minute interaction, because it wasn't just the last 5 or 7 minutes. And it wasn't just the 53 minutes, it's everything that has led up to that. And Annalise Nielsen just did a very good bit of analysis on Sky News, and it's one of the rare ones that you see from the Australian media, because it is such surface level, born so much out of ignorance. If you've been paying attention to US politics over the last 4 years, certainly the last 2 years, nothing that happened should surprise you. The US's position, Donald Trump's position on Ukraine, has been clear for years, and the polling in the States backs that up. The American people do not want to fund this war.
Yep, that's
now,
right.
You might say that's not morally correct, we don't agree with that position, that's fine, but that is their position. They don't want to pay for this war. They want Europe to pick up the slack.
But I think you hit a really good point there, Reza. The point is that you can still support Zelenskyy from a moral point of view. Russia should not have invaded.
Well,
you can talk about the whole background, and that's a separate thing. But James, you know, you don't invade another country, so that's fine. Russia should not have invaded. But there's only 2 ways forward.
Yeah.
One way is you stop the war now, you draw a line, and you stop killing. The other way is one side has to win that war. Well, no one's going to defeat the Russians. You're just not going to do it. Maybe, you never know, in some fantasy novel you could. Alternatively, could the Russians defeat the Ukrainians? Probably. The reality is the war has to stop, and Zelenskyy was a fool not to take that moment, not to grab that moment and say, this is it, let's finish the war, James.
This was an absolute disaster for Zelenskyy, and the evidence was the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States was face-palming during the press conference, because the whole conference, Zelensky's sitting there fidgeting. He wants to make a statement. This is Trump's press conference. Let Trump do his thing, but to try to argue your point, and JD Vance didn't provoke this. Zelenskyy provoked it by trying to argue the case in front of everybody. You do that behind closed doors.
And it's interesting you say that, because it's almost like a microcosm of the war. Who provoked who? Who started it?
But
Who said diplomacy first? Who said this first? Who said that first?
They had a deal that was being worked on that was enormously advantageous to Ukraine, and for some crazy reason, Zelenskyy decided to renegotiate it in front of the world's media in the White House, knowing the positions that Trump and Vance have on this entire issue. It was extraordinary, and I do wonder whether it was calculated or whether it was just him losing his temper. Well, there are those who are saying that
the White House calculated it.
If you watch the full 53 minutes, I don't think any sort of sane person could say that, because he was goading them repeatedly, and Trump was uncharacteristically diplomatic for a good 40, 45 minutes, sort of letting things go. And even JD Vance let a lot go through to the keeper until it just got too much. And one thing we've got to talk about is, again, morally, of course, Russia is in the wrong, Putin is in the wrong. They should not be invading a smaller country. They should not be taking advantage of the weakness in the White House at that time to do that. But we've also got to look at the reality that, as you said, Ukraine isn't going to win this war. We know that. So what are the options? And even some of the most ardent pro-Ukraine experts have clearly said there's 3 options. Either you give up and give Putin what he wants. Obviously, no one wants to do that. Or you continue this war, and if you actually want to win it, if you want Ukraine to win it, you've got to commit forces. You've got to commit ground forces. You've got to commit a lot more arms.
As Donald Trump said, you've got to gamble with World War III, because the Russians have nukes.
It's probably going to spark World War III. And really, all those European countries who are coming and posting, tweeting about their support, even our own Prime Minister, are you willing to send troops? Are you willing to send troops? Are you willing to spend a lot more money to...
Oh, who needs troops, James, when you dig up a couple of old bushmasters that are out in the desert there with sand in the petrol diesel thing and send them over?
Even that had to be dragged, kicking and screaming to providing.
But Rita,
or you do a deal. You do a deal that's advantageous to Ukraine. And that's where we were on the verge of, and now that's been entirely jeopardised. More people are going to unnecessarily die. This war is going to be prolonged. For what aim? Well,
the aim is very clear. It all boils down to the idea of some kind of security. Trump believes that that security comes simply through having American investment, having Wall Street invested in Ukraine with the rare earth minerals, that by itself, not only the people who are working there, but also the security apparatus that would surround that, is sufficient to deter the Russians. Zelenskyy believes that history tells him that's not the case. That's what the whole spat boiled down to. Let's take a quick look at a bit of it, basically where Trump is, pointing out his point of view.
No, in this entire meeting, you said thank you. You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right, I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television.
And he was right about that. Great television.
It was great. All he had to do, Zelenskyy, to finalise this deal was wear a suit, show the respect to the Oval Office, to the White House, show up, have the negotiations behind closed doors, have a nice little meeting in front of the world's media, say some damning things about Putin, and shake hands and walk away with a massive
there's something
win.
else he could have done.
But I tell you how badly he went.
Yeah.
Almost immediately after, one of his biggest backers, one of the people who has fought hardest for more funding for Ukraine, has stood by Zelensky's side, has been a long-term friend of his, despite other than just the political support, is Lindsey Graham.
Yeah.
And he immediately disowned him, which shocked me because I thought he would come out and say it was disappointing, but we've got work to do. Let's just have a look at what Lindsey Graham said immediately after.
What I saw in the Oval Office was disrespectful, and I don't know if we can ever do business with Zelenskyy again. I think most Americans saw a guy that they would not want to go in business with. The way he handled the meeting, the way he confronted the president, was just over the top. So I think the relationship between Ukraine and America is important, vitally important. But can Zelenskyy do a deal with the United States? After what I saw, I don't know.
And he went on to say Zelenskyy would either have to step down or dramatically change his approach to try to salvage something here. So let's talk about what matters, because what matters is we want to end this war and we want to stop having Ukrainians die needlessly, and we want to have an advantageous deal for the Ukrainians who've suffered over 3 years.
And yet, James, all the Europeans are jumping in immediately. Starmer's there this morning with Zelenskyy. The King's going to be seeing Zelenskyy. So last week they were all courting Donald Trump. This week they're all rushing off to court Zelenskyy. What's going on?
That's the irony for Zelenskyy, is that Trump had just met with the French, he'd met with the British, he'd met with the Polish. So Trump was set up, having been sympathetic towards Europe. There was no need for Zelenskyy to now go in and poke the bear. And if he wanted to talk about the importance of security and all that Putin had done in breaking ceasefires, he could have talked straight to the media rather than taking the discussion to JD Vance and taking them on. And that's the other interesting thing about this. You've now got a White House that will not be pushed around. Could you imagine Kamala Harris rather than JD Vance? Could you imagine Biden and all
they'd
world
just be
leaders?
writing checks.
Exactly. But now all world leaders are on notice. You go to the White House, you don't want to be foolish because they will not tolerate fools, which may be a reason why Anthony Albanese's not visited yet.
Oh, well, no, that's a great point, James. And it is a disgrace that Albanese has zero relationship with Trump. Not surprising, but still a disgrace.
Maybe it's the best.
Penny Wong, and I mean, we are just so on the nose with the modern American world, the new Pax Americana, if you like, the new world of Donald Trump. We are just nowhere to be seen. I hope all that changes when Peter Dutton wins the election, which he's going to do in a few weeks' time.
But this also goes to that speech, that groundbreaking speech we've spoken about on this program so much, that JD Vance gave in Europe.
Yeah.
Yes.
There is a political realignment. Again, many political analysts may not like it. It doesn't matter if you don't like it. This is the reality. America is now an America First approach. They do not want to support endless wars overseas. They do not want to have values that are in line with the European elite. They're not for open borders. They're not for green climate madness. They're not for all the cultural stuff
European
as
socialism.
well as the New Age European socialism. There is a divorce happening there, and again, this is something the American people voted for. Whether you like it or not is immaterial, and the polling on this has been very clear. It's not just the Trump election.
And it's not really all that surprising, James, if you consider that in Europe they've gone down the route of net zero, which is basically just socialism, climate change. They've deindustrialised the great industrial nations of Europe, Germany and France and others. They've deindustrialised themselves. They're reliant on the US for military support and cash. They're reliant on the Russians for energy. They're socialists. They've got open borders that are destroying their welfare states. The complete antithesis to every single Donald Trump policy. So no wonder Donald Trump looks at them with absolute horror and and I think this is what the message from the White House yesterday was: Europe, you're on your own. Take it away. You know, your problem. You either do it the American way or we're out and you can sort this mess out.
That was JD's message, wasn't it? Why would we spend billions of dollars supporting people who don't share our values?
Precisely.
And again, I go back to Anthony Albanese. He's got a problem because his values don't exactly align with the Trump administration. And Anthony Albanese does not want to be embarrassed on the world stage. He ought to tread very carefully, I think.
Well, in direct opposition to Trump, I would say, everything that Albanese stands for.